Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Jan Vermut, and joining me as always, my two co-hosts, Jonathan Edwards and Scott Burleson. Today, we have a guest that if you don't know him, it's more than about time that you finally do. He's something of a UX rockstar. I think maybe you have a different description, and one of the leading and most influential experts in the field. We're talking about Jared Spool. He's a maker of awesomeness at Center, the school he started with Leslie Jensen-Inman to create industry-ready user experience designers, and where he's training the next generation, basically, of UX people. In the decades he's been in the tech field, he's worked with hundreds of organizations, written 2 books, published hundreds of articles that I really recommend, has appeared on podcasts, and tours the world speaking to audiences anywhere. I can recommend his talks, his writing, and his courses to anyone interested in the field, because Jared is not only a great communicator, but always insightful and rarely at a loss for words. So, Jared, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jan. I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Great. So I want to maybe start with a very high level question. I mean, you see UX people from all over the world and all over the place. How is UX doing? So there has been quite some turmoil, I think, in the recent years in different areas of the business world. Innovation labs are taking a beating here and there. UX, in my experience at least, is something that is more and more becoming kind of state of the art. But how is it doing? Where is it going? Is it under pressure like others as well? What do you see?
I think that I think there's a growing desire in the both business and non-commercial world, governments, universities, charities, nonprofits, to have better and better experiences for their customers, their donors, their citizens, their employees, the people who use their product but don't get the choice in using their product. There's a lot of interest. It's a competitive advantage to have a product that is a better experience. That's been proven time and time again. You look at some of the top companies in the world, like Disney and Apple, and their only competitive edge is that they have much better experiences than their competitors, and that's propelled them to be much more successful financially. So there is a real understanding of this that's growing in business, and it's getting to be a deeper and deeper understanding, one that involves lots of thoughtful takes on what a better experience is. And so I'm optimistic. I see more job postings every day. I get to work with companies in practically every industry that is looking to make their products better. I've been working with clients lately in life sciences and logistics and network administration, healthcare. Every industry is focused on making sure that the experiences their customers have are the best ones. Now, there are lots of companies that are not putting any investment in that at all, but the number who are making that a priority is growing every day. And the real problem, I think, for the UX field is we're not actually set up well to handle this type of acceptance and success.
Oh, that's interesting. So, okay. So in what sense? Can you elaborate a little bit on this? So you're, can you elaborate what you mean and in what sense are you not set up for this?
Well, I think it's a bit like the dog has finally caught the car and doesn't quite know what to do with it. Right. Yeah. Up until very recently, most of the energy in UX has been spent on trying to convince people to let let the UX people do UX things. And um, and
Yeah.
now that they're getting brought into organizations where that convincing doesn't need to happen, they actually don't
Yeah.
know what to do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
particularly, they don't, many UX people have no clue how to work strategically. They know how to work tactically. They can, when somebody says, okay, here's a design, go try it out with users, they know exactly what to do. But when
Yeah.
somebody says, um, I need a deep understanding of who our users are so that we can find innovative opportunities that are going to change how
Yeah.
how people do the things that our products help them do, opportunities that none of our competitors know. Most UX people don't even know how to start.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree that there is. I mean, I've just had a discussion yesterday. That's why I have it on my mind, where somebody, a CEO said to me, "Well, now we also have, it's a software company," and he said, "Well, now we also have, it's a small software company, but still, we also have somebody in UX. Our products now not only work, but they also look nice." And I feel like that's somewhere kind of UX has started there and has moved now its way up and up into kind of the ladders of corporates, and they're in a position there where they have to be more strategic. I mean, that's really where you want to go. But I mean, that's a big change. What do they need, or how can they start approaching maybe UX from a more strategic mindset or a more strategic, yeah, perspective?
So um, you have to understand strategy, right? So 5 days ago, at the when we're recording this podcast, the Washington Post came out with an article about uh, the company Sonos
Yeah.
and how the newest app that the company shipped is turning their most loyal customers against the company. And it goes on to detail that the brand new version of the app doesn't is slower, doesn't have key functionality that users came to rely on, used to be accessible and isn't anymore. So visually impaired people can't use it. And it's gotten so bad, and they've had so many complaints that the CEO in the Washington Post article had to give an apology and explain that they're working on fixing it. And you can see how a company got to this moment. They've had software for a long time. I mean, that's the way you use the product. The Sonos makes speakers, and they are some of the best speakers in the world, and they're innovative in terms of the fact that you plug them into your Wi-Fi and they do amazing things,
Yeah.
and they sound great, and they're absolutely wonderful. But they sell hardware. They sell physical things that go on your tables and your desks that you use um,
Yeah.
to listen to music and television and whatever. And software has always been this sort of necessary thing that they had to have to control the hardware. But if you, for instance, look on their website and you look and it says, what are our products? The software is not listed there at all. They only think of the hardware as their products. That's what they sell. And so, in fact, they actually sell racks and shelves to mount to your walls. That's listed on their website, but the software is not. And this is their mindset, right? They put shelving above the necessary software to ship the product. But they have a
Yeah.
team of UX people, and I've met their team. They're a really good team of UX people, and they know what they're doing. But the problem is that they only know how to work tactically, like most UX people. They don't know how to work strategically. So when decisions were being made about how much energy do we put into this new version of the software, right? They needed a new version of the software because they hadn't updated it in a really long time. It was sort of clunky, but more importantly, their newest hardware can't be supported with the old software. So in order to take advantage of the features of the newest hardware, you have to have the newest software. So they start this process, and I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody since the article came out, so I actually don't know what happened at Sonos that led up to this moment. So I'm conjecturing here, but
Yeah.
based on hundreds of companies that I've worked with, I'd be willing to bet that this is probably what happened, which is they knew that they had to update the software. They knew that they had been putting it off forever and ever and ever because this new generation of hardware was coming. So they didn't want to invest in it over time. So finally, the new hardware comes. The hardware is almost ready to go out. They want to start selling the hardware. So they have this hard deadline that the software has to be ready, and they start working on the software, and the upgrades to software turn out to be harder than they expected it to be, and so they're doing their best to get the software done, and as they get closer to the deadline, they start cutting things out. So they start putting some things off to the next release or the release after that. And because of that, they're making all these decisions about what's going to be delivered. But they're probably not involving their UX people in those decisions at all, because the UX people are probably not positioned in the organization to have anything to contribute to that conversation, at least not in the minds of the people. They're the ones who make it pretty. They're the ones who figure out where the button should go in the app, but not, if we cut out this button, we're going to actually damage the experience for all these people. If we don't use the operating system's built-in accessibility features, we're going to make the system pretty much just a brick for anybody who needs those accessibility features. And suddenly, these decisions that are strategic decisions are not being made with any research input. They're not being made with any UX input, because UX people don't work strategically in most organizations.
Yeah.
And so now they're in a situation where they've delivered an app, and the president of the company, the CEO of the company, is having to publicly apologize for UX problems.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, not talking about the specific case because I don't know the details, but will you say, I mean, how much is this kind of, has business been kind of keeping UX down, and how much has UX not even tried to go into this more strategic direction? So how do you,
I think it's more
there's
the
also
latter.
Yeah.
I don't think business tries to keep UX down. I think people are busy and they want to focus their time on people who can contribute, and they don't see the contribution from UX at a strategic level. But that's not
Yes.
because they don't want to see it. It's because it's never occurred to them to look, and the UX people are, tell me what to research, I'll go research it. Tell me what to design,
Yes.
I'll go design it. Tell me what to wireframe, I'll go wireframe it. And
Yeah.
we have been spending the last 10 years struggling so much to work in agile environments, where the demand is that we actually take our practices and shrink them down to the tiniest little sprint-sized pieces,
Yeah.
that we lost focus on how we contribute strategically in a large way to an organization's overall objectives.
Yeah.
And you can see
Yeah.
this, right? I can walk up to practically any UX person in any organization that I work with, and I can say, can you give me the name of one of your users? And they can't.
That's a nice test. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They, when they talk about users, they say, well, the users need this, the users need that. I say, well, which user?
Yeah.
I don't know, users. Well, have you
The
met one?
average user, I think that's a term that you really like.
Yes.
No?
Have you met one? No.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about one of their experiences? Can you tell me what was the worst day one of your users had with this
Yeah.
product? They can't tell me what the worst day is. Well, how are we going to fix the worst day if they don't know what the worst day was?
Jared, I have to follow this up with a question, and you'll hear my bias in the question, so I apologize that for in advance, but be curious about what your reaction is. There was a UX designer I used to work with, and he often would begin with this phrase: "If I was a user, then I would," and then he would explain. And usually, I didn't like what followed that, but so again, I'm just transparent about my bias with that. But what is your thinking about that line of thinking of him? And I heard this phrase all the time: "If I was a user, then I would." What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it gets worse, right? I think we built we've built the whole development process on that, because every user story starts with, as system administrator, I want to, right? And we're pretending we're the users because we don't know anything about our users. And that's not empathy.
Yeah.
Right.
That's self-design.
Right.
Right. That's building the thing I want, which is great. There's nothing wrong with building the thing you want if everybody is just like you.
Right.
And if there's a big enough market of you out there, then go ahead, build the thing you want. There are lots of companies that have succeeded that way.
Right.
But once you have any diversity and variation across your user population, it changes. Yeah, last night I was talking to a UX leader who works at the largest bank in her country, and we were talking about the new account opening process and how to think about the user experience of opening new accounts. And she's like, well, do I just have one outcome? Right? An outcome, a UX outcome, is basically answers the question: if we do a great job on this thing, in this case, redesigning how you open accounts, if we do a great job on this thing, how will we improve somebody's life? And she had come back with, well, we do a great job on this thing, opening new accounts, we'll improve the user's access to banking. And I stopped her there and I said, first, okay, let's talk about this. Access to banking is very much a bank term, right? That's how banks think. We want to give people access to banking. Perfectly makes sense. That's not how customers of the bank think about it, right? 18-year-old goes off, gets his first job. Job is going to be depositing his paychecks directly into the bank, no more giving them a check. Why we still call them paychecks, I don't even know. But they're, depositing weekly pay into the bank. And the 18-year-old wants a debit card to have, and more importantly, wants to be able to connect to something in Venmo that isn't the parent's account, so the parents are not watching them spend their money. And so goes to the bank, opens their bank account, comes back, proudly says to mom and dad, hey, mom and dad, today is a fantastic day. I finally got access to banking. Who says that? Nobody says that.
Yeah.
Right? That's not how an 18-year-old talks.
Yes.
Right? That's not what they're thinking. They're not thinking to-do list, access to banking, check. Right? That's not it. And so we need to think in terms of the experiences of our users. But here's the thing. So then she says to me, okay, so if I get that specific, is that the only outcome I need? I said, well, I don't know. I mean, it could be the case that, you have someone else, right? Here's another situation that I've seen. Person realizes that they are about to come into a large amount of money, an inheritance, let's say, right? So suddenly they have this large amount of money, and it's complicated because when the person died who they're inheriting it from, the money's in all these different instruments. So they have, some of it's in stocks and some of it's in funds and some of it's in insurance, and they're going to be collecting all this money, and it's more money than they've ever had in their life. And they don't know the first thing about what to do with that amount of money.
Yeah.
And they need to put it somewhere. So they're going to open a bank account. Now, that's a completely different experience than the 18-year-old who's getting their first paycheck of, $180 a week, and they want to connect it to Venmo.
Yeah.
So the success criteria is completely different there. So tell me that both of those could use the same bank account opening process? I don't think so. But maybe if we really understand what are the essence of it, you could service them with a single stream, a single journey, as we like to call them. But just trying to understand the problem initially, in this first 10 minutes of understanding that these are two different types of opening an account scenarios, I can't imagine them being the same.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, you put in your name and your social security number in the US and some other critical information to prove you are who you say you are. And boom, they give you an account number and they set you up with a username and a password and you're done. Sure, that's it. But is that really opening an account?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I mean, you can make it the same process, but it's not going to be helpful for either. It's not. So
exactly.
I want to highlight two things. I mean, what I really liked about your answer, I think what you can immediately see is, and that's my experience all the time, is once you actually go out and talk to users and try to figure out what they're struggling with, it becomes so much more concrete, right? Access to banking is such an abstract term, but the two situations you described are everyday situations we can all relate to, and they are concrete. So I think that is a huge change. And the second thing I want to emphasize is, couple of times you said maybe. So this kind of, I really like this attitude of saying, well, I don't know, we need to figure this out. It's something that needs to be figured out. It's not something we can sit down and decide. So I just want to kind of emphasize this.
Yeah.
So is that,
emphasis noted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So is that a first kind of, is that a way for somebody who is sitting in a company and they're about to make strategic decisions? Would that be a smart way to kind of start in kind of leveling up your UX teams, saying, hey, let's stop, let's research this. We need to talk to users and so showing the value of UX in that way, or how can they kind of start sneaking themselves into more of that decision-making process?
I think the way you get into a decision-making process is you have something valuable to add to the decisions, right? And so you need to consistently have value.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. Lots of businesses are currently undergoing some sort of major transformation. In fact, I have this theory in the world that there are basically just two types of businesses. There are those that are undergoing a major transformation in their business, and there are those that don't know that they're undergoing a major transformation in their business. So there's basically these two types, right? Nice. So let's pick one. So I'm going to pick an automotive company, a company that's been around for, I don't know, 120 years, been making cars. And for 120 years, they've been making gas-powered cars. But now they have to make electric cars. The future is clearly written that if they don't have a line of electric cars, and sometime in the relatively near future, around the end of the decade, maybe, they have to be predominantly electric cars, right? But going from gas-powered cars to electric cars is a complete re-engineering of the vehicle, which means it's a complete re-engineering of the manufacturing process. It's a complete re-engineering of the supply chain. It's a complete re-engineering of the sales process. And plus, because it's going to be a 7 to 10 year transformation of, currently we're 100% combustion engines, and eventually we're going to be 100% electric engines, but we somewhere in between we're going to be a mix, and we have to service those customers and deliver quality products to those customers. We can't just flip the switch and be all electric. We have to, once we are 100% electric, we're still going to have 5 to 10 years of cars on the road that are still combustion cars that we have to service and make good on. So we're going to have to change our entire service network, our entire service approach, our parts network. Everything is about to change. So you're the CEO of this company that's undergoing this massive change, unlike any change any CEO has undergone, many of whom you're related to because, CEOs inherited the company that way. And so this is there's nothing to prepare you for this moment. So who do you get advice from? Well, you probably get advice from your board of directors, but they don't know anything about the automotive industry. They're just rich people. And you go and you talk to the people who are closest, right? You go and you sit down with your salespeople and whoever is in charge of your supply chain and whoever's in charge of your manufacturing facilities and whoever oversees the service operations. And you put together this task force, this team that's going to basically be your brain trust going through this transformation. And you take the people who are closest to the things that need to be thought about, and you bring them into your inner circle, and you're constantly working with them. You know who's not in that group? The custodians, the janitors. Right? The people who keep your factories clean, your offices clean, your dealerships clean. I mean, these are people, you will admit, they are critically important to everything you do, right? If you don't have clean offices, your employees won't want to come to work. If you have dirty manufacturing facilities, the cars you make are going to be lower quality. If you have dirty dealerships, customers won't want to come in. So you pay good money for this custodial team and you hire the best custodians, but they're not part of this transformation because they don't have any insight on how keeping the factory clean will make a difference going forward. Maybe you ask them once or twice in the years of, hey, if we move from oils to gases, do things change? But it's not really the core transformation. They're not on the task force. So here's the big question: where's UX in all this? Are they on the task force, or are they like the custodians who are there if we need them, but we're not going to them for insight? Yeah. Except who could be helping us understand, well, if we have to train every single mechanic to now be servicing electric cars, what does that training process look like? What tools will they need? What skills will they need? What materials will they need? If we have to redesign the supply chain, how does our supply chain monitoring and tracking systems and our logistics software have to change? If we change the factory, how does all the automation tools change, right? It would seem to me that UX would be absolutely critical to talk about the human factor in all of this. But do you know any teams that are ready for that conversation?
No, well,
they're not that many for it. They have not been working at that level. They are not there. And this is the problem. we're not part of the task force of any major transformation. Remember, there's only two types of companies: those currently going through one and those currently going through one.
Yeah.
And yet we're not part of that because we have kept ourselves being tactical because we're still trying to figure out how to do research in an agile sprint.
Yeah. I really love this. I mean, I think this is the challenge at hand. You made a quite well, I think you yourself called it then a radical proposal. I think UX needs to step up its game, and you went even so far to say put UX in charge, right? So I think that's the title of one of your recent articles. So what is your proposal in this put UX in charge? Should let's remove kind of the board of directors, CEO, and UX is in charge. Everybody reports to the researcher, or what does that entail?
Well, at the time I was thinking just instead of having a chief product officer, which is where lots of UX people, developers right now in many organizations, not all, but in many organizations, there's some sort of person who is a general manager type, and they're often product related, particularly software companies, right? Less so in hardware companies, but in software companies, you tend to find that one of the most powerful people in the organization is the chief product officer. They set the future direction of where the products are going to go, which sales then sells to, and supports, and so the revenue stream is dependent on decisions they make. Engineering reports into them, or is dictated, their work is dictated by them, even if there's a peer chief engineering officer. Usually what the engineers build is determined by the product officer, not the engineering officer. Design typically reports into the chief product officer, more so than, say, reporting into marketing or sales, or reporting directly to a CEO. It's very unusual to find a design leader that reports into the CEO because of that problem, right? The CEO doesn't need to check with design to make sure things are running right, but they need to check with product to make sure that the business will achieve its goals. And so that's the typical thing. And when you have a research effort, a group of people whose job it is to go find out everything there is to find out about the users, the customers, they are nowhere in that landscape. They report to the head of design, who reports to the head of product, or they report into the product organization or something. But they're almost always at the bottom. And yet, all of those big decisions, what do we build? What is the schedule? What staff do we put on this? How big is the team, right? What skills do we need? How important do we think this thing is to our success? The Sonos thing, right? If I don't think the app is important to our success, I'm not going to put my best people on it. I'm going to fund it with as little money as I can, give them as little time as possible, because they're not a priority until, the Washington. And that problem of folks being in this situation where they're at the bottom is leaving a lot of value on the table.
Yeah.
And if we really gave research its due to really make the organization the world's foremost experts in who our users are, what our users need, what makes one user different than another, what their current experiences are like, what their future experiences could be like. If we really gave that to research, then they would be the people who would be the right people to decide what product should we build next, what skills do we need on the team, how much time would we need to build those things, who in the organization would benefit those things.
Yeah.
And so product development engineering should report to research, because research should be the one setting the direction, setting the OKRs, setting all these things.
No, I
And
completely
everybody
agree.
else
Yeah,
is
sorry,
there
go
to
on.
make sure we execute on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is I completely agree. I mean, it's I think the gist of the proposal is or I think maybe it was something I want to just point out is it's not that you need to kind of follow another one's opinion, but it's research. Let the research decide, right? And we can
Right,
debate what
right.
good research is up and
Now, I get a
down.
lot of pushback on this idea, and people say, well,
Yeah,
research
yeah, yeah. That's why.
form these decisions. But now you
Yeah,
have what we
exactly.
call in the United States the game of telephone, which
Yeah,
my understanding is
yeah.
in Europe, it's called something different. I was told in the UK that they call it Chinese whispers, which to me
Yeah,
sounds really racist.
yeah. We shouldn't use
Uh,
it's
um,
yeah, yeah.
and when I was in Germany, they told me that they call it Russian secrets, which
Ooh,
also is racist, but
again.
probably earned.
Yeah,
But but this idea that we can make research inform things, but that's what we always do. And guess what? People don't get the information when research just informs things.
yeah,
If we really want research to have a critical role in the decisions, then there really isn't anybody better than someone who is immersed in all the research, not just informed by the research, to make
yeah,
those decisions,
yeah,
which
yeah,
suggests that that person has to be deeply knowledgeable about the research. And who's going to be most deeply knowledgeable about the research? The person running the research efforts.
yeah, yeah.
So let me ask maybe a kind of a strange question at this point. Maybe it goes nowhere, but I thought it was quite a fun question. So in a universe where magic is possible, and people can just snap their hands and have their wishes materialize, uh, would there be any space for UX in such a world?
So, in a world that we don't know anything about because we've never seen it or been there, would something have a role in such a world? Well, this is going to be a guess. I'm just going to put it that way. I've done no research on this. Um, but would there be a role for UX in this? I guess, I mean, at some level, if your world of magic still has frustration, if people get frustrated by decisions that other people made, then absolutely yes.
Yeah.
Because that's what all UX is, right? UX stands for a user's experience, right? And experiences are measured on a scale of extreme frustration to extreme delight. You know, when I go out and meet people who don't work in our industry and they like, so what do you do? My basic response is, have you ever been frustrated with your phone or your computer? Have you ever wanted to throw it across the table or out the window? And they go, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I work with the
Couple of
people
times.
to prevent that from ever happening. Right. That's my definition of UX. Right. Is trying to make it so you never want to throw your remote out the window again. And so that's what I do. That's my job. And so if there's frustration, you know, if someone waves their magic wand and says some words that vaguely sound like Latin, and you know they mean to turn somebody into a strong, you know, burly, beautiful person, but instead they turn them into a hamster, then chances are there's a need for UX work here because something didn't go right.
Yeah, probably you would get a lot of lawyers, I guess. So the lawyers would probably be the new UX people, I imagine, to say, well, you're not allowed to wish for this or that, you know, because it disturbs or creates frustration for other people, maybe.
Well, you know, you point out something, which is I tell people all the time that lawyers are UX people. They just don't know it. And
Oh.
And because they're making decisions that affect the experience. Anybody who makes decisions that affect the experience is, in essence, a UX designer. Everybody's a UX designer.
But they, I mean, they don't know it. I mean, very often I think we're even ignorant that our decisions do have an effect. We make decisions just because, and maybe the Sonos, I don't know if that particular case, but we figure out later that it had an effect on experience. I think
that's
happens
exactly right.
quite often, which is astonishing somehow, but it happens.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. We don't know that the decisions we're making have an effect, and that's because there's no feedback loop, right?
Yes.
If I'm driving a car and I step on the gas pedal, the car goes faster. I take my foot off the gas pedal, theoretically, the car slows down. If I don't have a way of detecting that stepping on the pedal has made the car go faster, or that removing my foot has made it stop, I literally cannot control the car. I need that feedback. And when we make decisions, but there's no feedback that says, oh, that didn't go where we wanted it to go, right? Then we're going to make decisions. We're going to think, oh, that must have worked. And we're going to keep doing it more.
Yeah.
And we get reinforcement that an absence of feedback is success.
Yeah. I always try to, I mean, this is how I behave. Yeah. I don't know how many other users behave like this, but if I don't like a restaurant, I will always be polite and say I love the food and just never come back, which is a lack of feedback that it was horrible experience, and you don't want that. You want to know if there was a kind of a negative experience there. So I think that's I want to touch upon on something, because
can we go back to the restaurant for a second?
Yeah.
One of the things that really, because I've done research in restaurants of how kitchens work.
Oh.
And one of the things you learn is that really good chefs look at the plates that the busboy brings in when they clear the table. And they look at what food is left on the plates. And if they notice that the beans nobody ever eats the beans, they're smart enough to take the beans off the menu.
Yeah.
And put something else there. And that's so there is feedback, even if you don't say anything. But you have to be smart enough to look.
Yeah.
And the systems are built that you have to go out of your way to see what comes back into the kitchen, because the dishwashing section is a completely different section. You're busy on the grill and doing things to keep your kitchen running, and you're trying to get as many plates out there, and you have to wash the plates. So if you don't take the time to step and see what's coming back, particularly with new menu items, right? You'll see chefs do this when they change the menu and they now have something new. They pay really close attention. They actually go into the dining area. They watch what people are eating. When somebody orders the stuff, they look at their initial response. So they do user research. As a chef, you are taught to do user research. But how many CEOs of large organizations do what the chef does?
So you've hinted at this very strongly, but you said something very, very nice just some time ago, that to get into the decision process, as we were talking just in this session, sorry, that to get into the decision process, you have to have something valuable to add. And I think you've given a few hints as to what this is, even more than hints. Here you mentioned another term which I quite like, this notion of feedback. So would it be fair to say that the value that UX can bring to an organization is this feedback?
Absolutely. Absolutely. we have a phrase we use, which is there's a technical name for the absence of user research, and the technical name is guessing.
Yeah.
Right? When you don't have research, you're forced to guess.
Yeah.
And in most organizations, there's no feedback that tells you whether you guessed right or wrong. It's almost as if, let's say you wake up one morning in a hotel room in a city you've never been in before. It wasn't a mystery how you got there. You flew in the night before. It was dark. You got in a cab. They brought you to it, or you rented a car and you followed the directions from the airport to the hotel. But here you are the next morning, in the hotel room. You wake up with plenty of time to get to where you need to go, and where you need to go is someplace important. You have an important thing you have to be at. Let's say it's a wedding. In fact, let's say it's your wedding. So you have to get there, right? And you are necessary for this thing to happen, and you have to be there on time. And you've given yourself enough time, you think, to get there, but you're not sure because you actually don't know where the wedding venue is, right? But you've been in other cities, and let's say you're getting married in a fancy little museum. You've been in other weddings that got married in fancy museums. And when you got into the car in the hotel, at the hotel, you always went northwest to get to those places. So you're going to go northwest this time, because that's what you've always done. Your experience tells you northwest is where the wedding is. And so you decide to do that. You start driving northwest, and it doesn't look right. You're not seeing the venue. You should have seen it by now. It's not there. I'm going to turn right because right feels right to me. So now I'm going to head sort of northeast, and I'm going to go northeast for a while. And this still isn't looking right. Maybe northwest was right to begin with. So I'm going to turn left again, and I'm now going to drive northwest for a while. Right? You'll never get there. Yeah. You'll never make it to your wedding. But this is how most businesses work. We drive to our wedding based on hunches, not based on any sort of researched data that tells us we're going in the right direction. And the hunches are all based on past experiences, and sometimes not even our experiences. I heard from this CEO that they always turned left, so I'm always going to turn left. I read that in Forbes. So this is how decisions are made in business. Yeah. And so how do we get information, right? It's not just feedback in the moment. It's like there is a history of people documenting the city for a really long time. We can get one of those documents. They call them maps. They're very detailed. You can actually ask it, where is the wedding? And it will give you driving directions. But it doesn't occur to you to do that because you didn't read that in the Harvard Business Review. You read, smart CEOs always turn left. Yes. And so this is the problem, right? So what do we start to do? We start to map experiences. And I don't mean journey maps, which has come to mean, or service blueprints, which has come to mean we take an average experience and we say, these are the steps that people use to open their bank account. What we do is we take a specific person's experience. We actually go out and we meet someone who just inherited a lot of money. And we find out, what did they have to do to get that money into their bank account? What was the process? What didn't they know? How did they find it out? We go out and we meet 18-year-olds who get their first job and see how they deal with the fact that their new employer says, by the way, I'm not going to give you a physical check. I'm going to deposit it into a bank account. What's your account number? I don't know. And so this is what we do. We spend time hanging out and we start drawing maps and we say, look, there's more than one person who opens an account and they each open accounts differently. And at some point they end up calling support. And when I check with the support people, they told me that they get 1 million calls every day about how to open a bank account because the way we do it, nobody can figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a good moment that I want to kind of sneak in. I have to sneak in jobs to be done on this podcast. It's something
Why?
where
we were having
I know.
nice conversation, and here you go,
it was
starting
so
to swear.
Got along nicely.
What?
So no,
what did I do to you, Jan? Did I insult you? Have I offended you in some way? What? Why?
Okay. Okay. So I'll ask the question quick and short. Well, okay. No, I'm gonna say a little bit something to make it at least a bit plausible. So I found that this there's two things that's needed. I think there's, on the one hand, I think there is, somehow it goes with humility, or I don't know, this default position of saying, I don't know, I need to research. I think that we need to kind of celebrate and emphasize much more. And the second thing is for me, jobs to be done has been a language to use in order to kind of facilitate that switch, in order to go from abstract stuff or internal view, talking about the user experience or what the user actually wants to achieve. But I want to get your view in, like, well, the basic question is, what do you think about jobs to be done and why do you hate it? I think that would be a fair way to put it, right?
You want a short answer or a long answer?
It's up to you. We're coming up on an hour. I tend to be in a middle long.
Okay. There's an old Eastern European folktale about a traveler who travels. This is before horses were invented. So they travel from village to village on foot. And it takes them a while. And when they come to another village, it's a tradition amongst this part of the world where when a stranger, a traveler comes into your village, you offer them scraps of food to eat and a place to sleep, to rest, just out of kindness. And then they thank you and they move on their way. And that's just what you do. You're brought up to do that. But this time a traveler comes into town and he walks up to the first house that he sees and he bangs on the door. He says, I'm a traveler. Might you have some scraps of food? And the person says, I'm sorry. I would love to. Normally I would, but we have a drought and we don't even have enough food for our family. So I'm going to say no. He says, well, no problem. No problem. I understand. I would do the same. So he then goes to the next house, gets the same response. Next house gets the same response. Nobody's given any food. There's a drought. They don't have enough food for their family. So what he does is his backup plan. He goes into the town square in the center and he finds a little place to set up and he takes out some materials and he starts a little fire and then he pulls out of his bag a pot and a big spoon and he starts stirring the pot and then he pulls out of his bag a giant stone and he puts it in the pot and he starts stirring the stone in the pot. The neighbors have been watching all this and they start to come over and they said, what are you doing? He says, well, I'm making some stone soup. When I'm done, would you like some? And they say, yeah, I guess. What will it taste like? And he says, well, it would taste better if I had some carrots. And one of the neighbors says, well, I've got some carrots. So it goes and they go grab some carrots, put it in, start stirring the carrots. He says, okay, is it just going to taste like carrots? He says, no, it's actually better if we put some water in it. Someone says, well, I have a little bit of water in the well. I'd be happy to donate that. So they get their water. And somebody else says, would meat be good? You say, oh yeah, meat would be perfect. They get some meat, and they start adding other things. And the next thing you know, this big pot of stew is being cooked, out of the stone and all these other things. And when it's all done, he says, there's more than enough for my needs. Would you all like to have some? And they go, yes. And so everybody gets their bowls, and they all try the soup, and they have a grand old time. And at the end of the meal, when all the soup is gone, he says, you've been so nice to me. Everybody here has been so kind. I'm going to leave you with the stone, because I know you have a famine and you're struggling to eat. So I'm going to leave you with the stone, and you can all make stone soup from now on, because you saw how I did it. You know how it's done. And then he picks up his stuff, packs up his bag, and walks out of the village. And then as soon as he's out of eyesight from the village, he reaches down, picks up a stone, puts it in his backpack, and continues on. Now, people will tell you that the moral of this story is that if you get a community to work together, they do better than if they just think about themselves. But I don't care about that. That's not the point of the story as far as I'm concerned. The point of the story is that at no time can you, as the person telling the story, or even really listening to the story, can you believe that the stone actually makes soup? Because if you believe that the stone makes soup, the traveler dies. Because one day he's going to be out in the middle of nowhere, and he's going to try and make stone soup, and he's going to starve to death. Right? The traveler has to understand that the stone has no actual purpose except to get people to think differently.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only purpose for jobs to be done, because technically it's actually a really bad way to do UX.
Okay.
It's sloppy as all get out. It's like, the stone has all sorts of crappy bacteria all over it that could kill you. And we're not paying attention to that.
Right. I love the story. I'll probably disagree. If you have another hour, we'll spend it on that one. But I think
it's
see
just
where
theater, Jan. It's just theater. There's nothing substantive to it. Sure, if you have people who have never ever thought about their users, and you say, what do people hire our product for? What do they fire our product for? You'll get them to think about the users. It's a gimmick. In the world of magic, and not the Jonathan magic, not that,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about professional magicians. Professional magicians have this whole language for how illusions are done, and there's a type of illusion that's done with a gimmick. And a gimmick, unlike manipulation, which is if you've ever seen somebody make cards just disappear or reappear from their hand, or you see people take a coin in their hand and it disappears and then it reappears, that's manipulation. That is physical agility, right? You have to practice for years to get so good at that it's undetectable. But a gimmick, anybody can do a gimmick. When you buy toy magic kits that have 15 magic tricks for your 8-year-old, every single thing in that kit is a gimmick. They are no fail magic tricks, and you just rely on the device itself to do the magic. And that's what jobs to be done is. It's a device you can use to do a level of magic. But the thing is, you don't actually learn the craft from that. And what you get from that is very limited to what the gimmick can do. And so jobs to be done is a gimmick. And Nobody in the real world says, I hired my blender to make a milkshake. Right? I fired my coffee machine because it didn't make the type of coffee I wanted. Right?
Yes.
This is not how people talk. This is not how people think. You are not talking about actual experiences. You are layering this perception of experience on top of what's actually happening and hoping that it matches. And 9 times out of 10, it does not. And when I see jobs to be done used in organization, 9 times out of 10, what I'm seeing it done is that someone with authority has a belief as to what is the most important thing to ship. And they use whatever data, they cherry pick whatever data comes back from the jobs to be done process to support the fact that they are going to, no matter what, build AI into this product, whether users want it or not.
I think just time-wise, you have to leave it at that. I said in the beginning, Jared is rarely at the loss for words, and I think you've shown this quite well. Well, where should people go to find out more about you, to find out more about, I mean, I mentioned the Center, but where should people go to so they have access to your courses and your content and so on? Where should we point them to?
We have a community called Leaders of Awesomeness, which has 50,000 UX people in it who are interested in becoming more strategic in their organizations. And we have regular live sessions that we do. It's free. We have all sorts of resources that we publish through Leaders of Awesomeness. We also do paid events. We're doing one probably before this podcast comes out on strategic research, because it's coming up at the beginning of June in 2024. But we do them every few months. We'll be doing one on product vision, how you create a vision that gets your senior executives so excited about where your products are going, all based on research that people will be lining up. We also have resources on how to create measurements and metrics for UX that are based on strategic goals. You know, the success is not, did somebody go through all the screens, but success is, did they actually get the bank account they needed, and are they using it successfully? So those are the types of metrics that we talk about, and these are perfect for OKRs and KPIs and things where you really want to surface what the value of great UX is. So we have all of these resources available to us, but the place to start is Leaders of Awesomeness. Everything happens from there.
All right, perfect. Well, Jared, thank you so much for taking the time. It was a real pleasure. And I think, my friends, that concludes today's Product Quest podcast. So please send any comments or ideas for future shows to productquestpodcast@gmail.com, and see you next time.
This has been fun. Thank you for inviting me.
It was really nice talking to you. Thank you.
Okay, so much.
Thanks,
Jared. Bye.
Bye-bye.